So, as there are many different definitions and opinions of nihilism, there too is also a few different philosophical positions that would fall under the spectrum of nihilism. Metaphysical nihilism. What is metaphysical nihilism? Metaphysical nihilism has to do with the realization that physicality really has no concrete grounds other than as an experience of an existential objectified manifestation, which features an appearance of solidified concreteness, but is in fact a transient, non-permanent reality that has no context other than as a projection of what we will call awareness. The actuality of what this is already the case before lucidity. So you don't achieve it, you realize it. In much the same way, the objects of your dreams also seem concrete, real, and existing independently of your mind. But upon awakening, the true nature of these objects is revealed. Or, perhaps in rare cases, you realize this as you are dreaming. This is what is called lucid dreaming. The equivalent of this in your waking reality could be said to be an enlightenment, if you realize it while you're existing. Or perhaps as an awakening, if you realize it upon death. So metaphysical nihilism is not so much a philosophical theory or position, so much as it is an aspect of a realization about the nature of reality, which is slowly facilitated through dealing with it firsthand. Might there be no objects at all? Or a possible world where there are no objects at all? Well, that's the thing. There are no objects at all, nor any world. There is, however, an appearance of objects in a world, which is where the ideas of their possibility of being either concrete or abstract objects comes from. Asking why there really are not actual objects is an understandable question. Contemplating the actuality of an object is similar to wondering if images on a film strip are actual objects. An imagination of pure potentiality projects these seemingly actual objects, but they don't have a fixed shape. They don't have a location. They don't exist in any time. They don't have identities, no inherent purpose, and are not substantiated through any externalized process. It's not necessary to think about objects existing or not in relation to worlds, because this sticks the attention on the objectified projections while assuming an oversight. There cannot be any worlds without objects, because a world in itself is an object. So, it cannot be rightly said that a world can exist without an object, in the basic sense of what we know and define as an object. Moreover, any world in and of itself is not a singular entity. Even on a barren wasteland planet, there are a multitude of factors that combine to make up a landscape, each factor only maintaining a station due to its relativity to a series of neighboring contributing factors. This brings us to the example of the simple tree. The tree is only a tree due to many, many things that are not tree. The soil, the nutrients in the soil, water, sunlight, animal activity, seasons, pollination, and so on. And so this takes away the possibility that there may be a world with no objects at all, or even a world that contains only abstract objects. If the world is indeed a world, then just by meeting the criteria of being considered a world, then it cannot only contain abstract objects. An abstract world with abstract objects would be a more accurate possibility to consider. Such a world could be in your imagination right now. But to meet the definition of being an actual world, it would have to have the capacity of being experienced. Such a world could be said to exist in your dreams when you sleep at night, because you experience them existentially, yet they are completely abstract. That is to say, you are not grounded there. You have not laid down attachments to anchor you there with more density. And this is a point about nihilism that is always glossed over. The methods to self-recognition and awakening is necessarily a destructive road. Our essential essence is what is real, and everything else that is added to this essential nature are false edifices. They are additions, facades. So in order to find the original essential essence, it is necessary to negate or subtract these false installations. And this is the primary intent of nihilism. In the exploration to self-recognize, nihilism looks to subtract everything and anything that is not true reality, that is, the original essential essence. So perhaps due to misunderstandings or misconstrued ideas concerning this primary intent, nihilism becomes associated with a lot of crude concepts or immoral behavior, both by harsh critics and those that wish to forge an allegiance with nihilism with philosophy incongruent with its purpose. We subtract or negate to find truth. It is a destructive process, but the process is not intended for destruction just for the sake of destruction. We don't subtract just for the fun of it. So it's apt to reference Wikipedia in relation to nihilism, because its entries do represent many of the common misconceptions. So Wiki says, quote, "To understand metaphysical nihilism, one can look to the subtraction theory in its simplest form. 1. There could have been finitely many things. 2. For each thing, that thing might not have existed. 3. The removal of one thing does not necessitate the introduction of another. And 4. Therefore, there could have been no things at all." Unquote. So you're telling me that these 4 bullets somehow help one to understand metaphysical nihilism. How so? It's not saying very much. No thing exists independent of awareness. Things exist only existentially as projections of pure potentiality. So it's not a matter of things that could have been or might not existed. None of these possible concepts matter or have any relevance without an existential component. They cannot be actualized without such an agency. Taking away an object and not replacing it with anything of itself is incorrect. Any such object is not isolated, nor does its underlying building blocks go anywhere if you take away its appearance. All appearances, fine or dense, solid or vaporous, are of the same stuff. You could call it energy. Nothing new can be introduced with this, nor anything taken away. Only projections made out of energy take on an appearance and fade away. So getting the attention stuck on appearances, and then from this snapshot, proposing that you could take away these appearances one by one until you have an empty world, is overlooking the underlying truth. A world cannot ever be considered empty. And taking away objects doesn't take away anything other than an appearance. A better consideration would be, what would the removal of the projected energetic morphing substance that takes on the appearance of all things leave in its absence? Pure potential, the source of all things. And pure potential doesn't look like anything. It's not energy. It's not empty. It's not a void. It's not an appearance. It's not comparable to anything in your inventory. It couldn't even be said to be abstract. For even the abstract would need to have some sort of context to provide the platform of an allowance of an existence of something only being grounded in a thought or idea but not concrete. And from this consideration, the truth of so-called metaphysical nihilism can be appreciated. Never mind could be or might be. There is no thing existing anywhere. Pure potential does what it does, and it doesn't rely on any of its manifestations to do what it does. So even arguments postulating necessary elements of existence, such as various universal laws or physical codes or whether being numbers, sets, or values, don't hold water. Not to say that laws or codes are not instantiated or applicable to an existential reality. They are. Knowing any of this intellectually won't stop you from getting run over by a bus if you step in front of it. But the laws and codes only apply to a framework. They are not absolute, despite having seemingly absolute implications to a subject. So no, there are not necessarily any concrete or abstract objects existing anywhere, beyond the momentary existential awareness of them. So, to say that an extreme form of metaphysical nihilism is commonly defined as the belief that nothing exists as a correspondent component of the self-efficient world obviously frames everything incorrectly and with a faulty reasoning. No world could be said to be self-efficient, as it is a cog in a system itself. More accurately described, nothing exists as a necessary corresponding component to pure potentiality. The American Heritage Medical Dictionary defines one form of nihilism as, quote, an extreme form of skepticism that denies all existence, unquote. That's interesting. But what to make of that definition? It's good to be skeptical. It's healthy and useful. But what exactly is being denied? If one is in a position to deny all existence, then it should be sufficient to conclude that one has to be existing to make such a denial. but by what standards and manner is existence being qualified as? Being existentially aware is proof enough of an existence. But don't go too far and start thinking that this means that this existence has any existence outside the awareness of the existence. In other words, that this existence is located somewhere actual and has a concrete substantiality independent of awareness. And this is a key point to remember, because Wiki goes on to say, quote, "One way of interpreting such a denial of existence is as follows. It is impossible to distinguish existence from non-existence, as there are no objective qualities, and thus a reality that one state could possess in order to discern between the two. If one cannot discern existence from its negation, then the concept of existence has no meaning, or, in other words, does not exist in any meaningful way. Meaning, in this sense, is used to argue that since existence has no higher state of reality, which is arguably its necessary and defining quality, existence itself means nothing. It could be argued that this belief, once combined with epistemological nihilism, leaves one with an all-encompassing nihilism in which nothing can be said to be real or true, as such values do not exist. A similar position can be found in solipsism. However, in this viewpoint, the solipsist affirms, whereas the nihilist would deny the self. Both these positions are forms of anti-realism." Unquote. It seems that the key point is consistently overlooked. Not having another state of reality or existence to compare and contrast against a normative reality or existence isn't what makes life meaningless, purposeless, or valueless. It also isn't indicative of existence not existing. The missing realization is that existence is purely existential. Existence doesn't exist objectively. There isn't any value, meaning, purpose, or narrative beyond the value, meaning, purpose, and narrative supplied by a subject. Even if all subjects agree and are unified in consensus on a certain value, meaning, purpose, or narrative, it is still subjective. For, despite all of this existing existentially, it doesn't have any foundations outside of a narrow context, that being existentiality. And I don't really see the proposed oppositional dichotomy of the affirmation and denial of the self that is supposed to distinguish solipsism and nihilism. I would say these two philosophical positions are very compatible and approach the same observations from different angles. Whereas nihilism pinpoints and negates the identification of awareness with a false sense of self, solipsism realizes that which is most present, most real, and able to be seen firsthand, of which is the only thing it can really know to be for sure. Pure awareness.